This is Robert Mardlacci, the Mindshare Learning Report, Canada's Learning and Technology e-magazine. And welcome to This Week in Canadian EdTech MindShareTV podcast in conversation with Melissa Burns, the awesome Melissa Burns, on the inspiration behind her Esports Canada startup as the founder and chair. Thank you for joining me this morning, Melissa.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
A little bit about Melissa. She's a national award-winning educator and international speaker within the fields of esports, founder and chair of eSports Canada, federally registered not-for-profit, supporting growth and development of Canadian esports ecosystem, and national associate member of International Sports Federation. Actively involved in esports advocacy, research, and a guest lecturer at the Canadian post-secondary institutions on the topic of game-based learning in schools, and recently published a chapter for the textbook Esports Research and Integration in Education. I look forward to reading that and host you on another podcast to talk about that. She is chair of the Manitoba Esports Association, a not-for-profit, which offers curricular and competitive gaming, as well as programming. It takes students beyond the game with a focus on developing global competencies, experience with STEAM, and career exposure to the EdTech or the tech sector. Her commitment to gender equity has driven her work in supporting and implementing programs that provide opportunities for students and marginalized folks to gain tech sector and STEM career exposure and skill development. Former chair of the board, member of the Game Association of Manitoba Educators. She's a past winner of the Mindshare Schools of the Future Challenge. And I should have put this in Chat GBT and asked for a condensed version.
You didn't have to read it all.
Thank you. Wow, what a year it's been. And kudos to you for providing this forum for students, a different forum of sorts. Talk to me about now you're a former onstage actor, music teacher. What is this all about? That's quite a cliche pivot, if I could use that term.
Of course, yeah. Well, and I think that speaks a lot to the millennials and the generations to come, is that gaming has been such a part of our lives that it wasn't necessarily something that I ever really had considered as part of my career. It was just something that I did for fun. That was recreational. I've always gamed. And so when I transitioned from the stage into the classroom, it was something that I was using as an opportunity to connect with my students. Because as you know, music teachers don't really have the opportunity to really get a lot of quality time with their students. And we all know that education is really about relationships. And it's those relationships with students that make a huge impact in the learning environment. And so when I had first started doing all of this back in 2016, it was about creating more opportunities for me to connect with some of the students I didn't see as often in my classroom. And then it evolved into something so much more than that, because I saw all the potential for it to be used pedagogically. And as my career expanded and grew and became so much more than just the music teacher, as I found myself then teaching classroom, and now this year teaching, working as a school and classroom support team member. So I'm working with educators to kind of target specific learning needs in their classrooms. It's been about looking at esports as a tool to really allow our students to dig into digital technology, learn how to use it intentionally. One of the things that I've really been encouraging people to think about is that technology and digital spaces are a lot like language, in that if you grow up in an English speaking nation, chances are you're probably going to learn to speak English, but your ability to actually read and write in English are going to be connected to a number of different external factors. It could be looking at did you have access to education? Did you have the opportunity to develop those skills? And right now we take it for granted that our kids are growing up as digital natives. They know how to speak with technology, But we have to be intentional in how we teach them to quote unquote read and write with technology. Otherwise, it becomes incredibly inequitable in terms of their skill development. We have to actually intentionally teach them how to use these tools so that not only because it's more than just career and future economy and all of those different career opportunities for them, because absolutely that is a big part of it, but it's also
Right.
that social aspect, because this is how people are communicating and living and experiencing life these days. And the latest research is showing that Gen Z is reporting just as many real life experiences in digital spaces as they are in physical spaces. So there's an actual paradigm shift in how we're experiencing life these days that our education system needs to catch up with.
Absolutely. And speaking of education systems, you're part of the awesome Louis Riel School Division, which we visited as part of my role at C21 Canada and held a summit at the incredible Museum of Human
Human
Rights.
rights.
And it was such a moving experience. And we got to visit some of your schools, and the
Mhm.
innovation, leadership is really important. And for the school district to give you agency to do what you do is incredible. And I hope that other school district leaders across the country and beyond have an opportunity to catch this podcast, because it really speaks to the impact that teachers are able to make with their students. So
Mhm.
enough about that. Now let's talk about Esports Canada. And
Mhm.
I pulled it up on, this is a wonderful tool that I'm using here with our MindShareTV. So sharing your website. That is the correct
Mhm.
website, I hope.
Yes,
Um,
that's what.
and so you were told during the pandemic you could not play instruments. I recall you sharing this story,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that kind of challenged you to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely had to think outside of the box. And so it changed the way that I approached my practice. But something that I've found very interesting since then is that now in this post pandemic world, that even as we're shifting, it has gone from shifting to what we thought was going to be back to normal, but normal isn't what it was before the pandemic.
Mm,
Because now, when you enter a grade 8 classroom, you can't assume that everybody is around a grade 8 level. You have kids that are reading at a grade 2 level and kids that are reading well into high school literature. And you've got students that are struggling with double digit addition and students that are working on like pre-cal. And so you can't make any assumptions about what level they're at in your classrooms anymore. And so we've had to pivot and change the way that we teach. Um, and so the focus isn't necessarily going to be about outcomes, but how do we diversify the way that we approach the content of our curriculum in a way that is really accessible for lots and lots of students? And that's a process that had started during the pandemic. And I think many people didn't anticipate that it was going to be, it was really only the start, it was the catalyst. And that now we're continuing that work in this recovery stage.
so are we, there's talk about that learning gap, right?
Mhm.
And it sounds like it is real. I mean, there's uh,
Yeah, I don't know that I would call it a learning gap as much as it is an opportunity, because those learning gaps were already there with our students. They were
right.
just kind of hidden. We were able to, prior to the pandemic, we were able to just kind of push everybody along, and we can't do that anymore. And so, one of the things that's really great about esports is that it allows students who may be struggling in some of the more traditional aspects of the sort of more literacy numeracy based curriculum to have aspects of their learning that they can do well, but also gives the teachers an opportunity to then build on some of those skills. Because what we're seeing a lot, at least in Manitoba, and we've seen it in Ontario, and recently with having the opportunity to go to the World Esport Championships and speaking with different
Right.
educators from across the world, looking at some of the European and Norwegian countries, the Scandinavian countries that are years ahead of us in terms of developing that shift in our pedagogy away from just looking at curricular content and objective based outcomes to skill based outcomes, looking at how are we developing those global competencies, how are we developing communication, collaboration, critical thinking, like all those things that
Sounds like the
allow them.
seven C's from C21 Canada.
Oh, well, that's exactly what it is. And so we're seeing that that's already been implemented in other parts of the world. And now we're starting to see that shift come into Canada. And so what we need to do is really use this opportunity of post pandemic recovery as an opportunity to shift our pedagogy to really hone in on those skills that are going to allow our
Amazing.
students to be successful holistically. The approach that I've always kind of taken with it is that if I can ask Alexa or Google what the answer is, then I don't need to teach it because they have that information. The
And
information isn't the important part. It's the skill to think critically about that information and discern what is true and what is not,
abs-
and where the reason or where the information is coming from. That's the skill that they need to have, and is going to be crucial to their success, both economically and personally.
well said. And add Chat GBT to that equation as well, that you'll be educating, doing some
Yeah.
professional learning with your colleagues. The
Yeah.
the the power of AI is unparalleled. And talk to me about what the research says, the impact that it's making. Let's illuminate that for those who might be a little reticent to introducing esports within their district or school.
So esports is really great because it's an equalizer. We know that our students are all playing games. Some of the at this point it's old data, but back from, I believe the study was 2019, Pew Research had done a study that showed that 97% of students between the ages of 13 to 18 were gaming regularly, meaning every
Wow.
single day. And when you look at your classrooms, you are going to see that reflected in your classrooms. I can't tell you how many teachers during morning meeting have been like, so what did you do this weekend or last night? And don't, other than video games, like that seems to be like the follow-up question to that, the qualifier to that question. Other than video games, what did you do? Because it's now the assumption that they're gaming. And the funny thing is that I feel like many people aren't actually reflecting on the impact and the significance of that follow-up qualifier other than video games, because we know that they're going to be doing it, and we know that this is something that has lots of social implications, but it also has a lot of impact on their future career readiness, because we're looking at, they're projecting by the end of this decade that over 400 million jobs are going to be automated. So the skills that they're
Wow.
going to need in less than 10 years is significantly different. Um, but we look at this as an opportunity for us to engage with our students. Knowing they're going to be playing anyway, why not bring it into the classrooms and use it as an opportunity to teach some of those seven C's, to teach them how to think critically, to teach them how to communicate and collaborate, but also to change the social aspect of it, because we know that a lot of the pushback we get is, well, it's such a toxic space. They are not, like, we've even seen it with Twitter battles online between educators, that people don't always know how to communicate politely online. We know that's going to happen. We know that people get tilted. We know that people are going to be toxic online. So why not use this as an opportunity to let them have a safe space to fail, knowing that they are going to fail, even in school, they are going to fail, and then flip the script, change the way the conversation ends, use it as a teachable moment. What happened? How do we reflect on what decisions were made? How do we use some of those social regulation tools that we're already building into our classroom vocabulary, and rein it in? How do we self regulate in those moments? And from the equity piece, it's also about providing opportunities for some of the folks that, whether they're female or LGBTQ or visible minority, who often don't have the same kind of presence online that the others do. We need to make sure that there is a space for them to be seen and to be heard, and provide that for them, provide them those extra supports to develop so that they can compete at higher levels and participate with more intention in those spaces. And part of that is also building stronger allyship, because then with our male students and colleagues, we give them the opportunity to start to explore when they are unintentionally even contributing to toxicity against minorities online. Because a lot of times it isn't actually something they're doing with intention. Sometimes it is, but oftentimes I've found with my students, they didn't recognize when they were contributing to it. And so this gives us an opportunity to make that kind of impact too. And even if it doesn't change everything, at least we're putting it in their mind and giving them the opportunity to think about it and make an informed choice when they are going to be interacting online.
Amazing. You so elegantly provided the insight and to the impact that esports does actually make in education. And I hope others in education have the opportunity, those who are the naysayers, to listen to the, the depth to which you've described the value and the impact. And um, this are you seeing the tweet? The government
Yeah.
of India recognized esports officially.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that. And by the way, we have a guest from India listening right now,
Oh, awesome.
from ICEC India. So
Amazing.
so this is truly international. How cool is that?
Yes. Yes, and this is huge. I think that this will become a catalyst for a lot of other nations this year. We've seen a lot of growth and development in terms of the conversations that are happening around esports internationally over the past year. But this one was a really, really big one. And so we've seen, like, Korea, the Republic of Korea, has had esports recognized for a long time now. We know that the European Union just in November had announced that they are going to be putting in a bunch of legislation to support esports. India now is making it official as a sport in the nation. And all of this really brings a lot of credibility to it, but it also, from the educational perspective, gives a lot of support and protection for our students. Because something that has been perhaps something that's held people back is that it's been a bit of a Wild West situation, because
Hmm.
the laws are kind of fast and loose with some of the different things, and looking at how do we ensure that student data is being protected, how do we make sure that privacy policies are being respected, how do we ensure that there is informed consent. And all of that is stuff that eSport Canada obviously takes very, very seriously, because we are founded by educators and we understand that space better than most. But this really is going to help put the pressure on the Canadian government and other governments here in North America to take this seriously, to give it the support it needs, because this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. This is
It's
not
massive.
something, it's absolutely huge. And so to really take the potential of it, especially in a recession where there's so much opportunity for us to become global leaders, we need to recognize it as a sport, put the funding in place to really promote the full ecosystem. Because something that is really unique about esports is that there are people who are impacted by esports at every age, and we're getting younger and younger
Amazing.
and older in the reach. I had a family from Ontario reach out to me just last week with their 4-year-old, who seems to be a bit of a prodigy,
Oh
and
my.
wants to know, like, how do we support our 4-year-old who's competing online with informed consent against adults and beating them? Like, what do we do to actually help him do something with this. Like, we're looking at a Sidney Crosby of esports,
That's so
right?
cool. So, question is,
Mhm.
will we see it in the Olympics one day?
Yes, absolutely. So we know that there is going to be some sports simulators at the next Olympics. So that's already been confirmed. And we know that there is definitely going to be a lot of conversation about which kinds of titles are going to be seen in the Olympics. But I feel very hopeful. And one of the things that I'd love to continue to explore is conversations with the Canadian Olympic Committee and looking at proactively how do we have these conversations around what esports looks like at the international stage from the Olympic standpoint, but also how do we support Canadian athletes in this space before the Olympics come, because it'd be so incredible for us to show up at the first games and just wipe it.
Oh, that is so cool. Let's talk about career pathways. There's opportunities beyond,
Huge.
right? So it
Yeah.
isn't truly a career pathway. And I'm sure you've met some professional gamers yourself.
Oh, of course. Well, and the interesting thing about it is that as you get into esports as a career option, it's a lot of people think of just playing as being the career. But similar to hockey, because Canadians understand hockey, there are lots of different jobs that are connected to hockey. You can look at marketing, branding, the broadcasting. It's exactly the same in esports. So as you're getting into esports and playing, you're also going to be looking at streaming and shoutcasting and analytics and marketing and branding and coaching. And I just had a conversation yesterday with someone who's doing their PhD in mental performance in esports and looking at
Wow.
research there. So there's and he's Canadian. There's so many options and venues and different careers to explore. And really, it also is beautiful in that there are so many opportunities here in Canada. And so the focus of Esport Canada has always been on supporting the Canadian esports
Right.
ecosystem. So even though it may not be as developed as some of the other nations in the world, we choose to keep all of our partnerships local to Canadian options whenever possible, because even if it means it's underdeveloped, we want to support the growth of what's happening here. We want to support Canada.
Brilliant. And so kudos to you for your leadership. And it's not done in isolation. You've got a team, and you've
Yeah.
got you're growing your footprint. So this should be a series. I think there's so much to unpack here in one show that we can create a monthly series, and we'll have to talk about that offline.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
talk to me about what's in store for 2023 to kick off the year, and
Hmm.
what folks might expect and how they can get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had mentioned earlier about Western Canada being kind of taking the reins on a lot of this stuff, and as no surprise, a lot of the movement we're seeing right now is in Western Canada. So right now, Ontario and Manitoba are both provinces with fully established school esport associations. So OFSE in Ontario and MC, so MSEA in Manitoba. But we are on currently in the process of onboarding Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC with provincial organizations within eSport Canada that are specifically school-based organizations. So the way that our process works is we look for different leaders, innovators, folks within the education space. They're all teachers or senior leadership who are interested in exploring it. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily implementing it yet, but they're exploring the space, and we want to make sure that there's geographical representation, so not just centralized to major cities, but rural and northern regions as well. Get as much physical representation as possible, get as many different kinds of schools represented as possible. So English, French, private, public, all of that represented. We bring them in for roundtable discussions, and we give them the tools and resources they need to build their own provincial
Brilliant.
organization that will support their students, because this is not something where we want to say that this is a one size fits all for the entire country. We want this to really reach the students in your area. And so that's why it needs to be led by the people in that province. So if anyone's interested from any of those provinces, we've got lots of stuff happening. I'll also tease that there will be an announcement very soon coming from St. Mary's University in Halifax, where we're going to be doing some really cool stuff out in Nova Scotia over the next few months. So
Awesome.
if you're in Nova Scotia, please be in touch and get involved with that. We want to hear from you. And this is a call out to all of Eastern Canada and especially the Maritimes that don't get left behind on this. If you want to really take advantage of this, get involved, send us a message. We are here to help, and we've got a whole team of educators, principals, IT professionals from schools across the country that are ready to support you. And we want to give you all the tools and help build capacity in the educators in your province so that they can do this as well. It's not something where we just put it out there and then leave you hanging. We are part of the growth together. And then the other space that's really growing and expanding is our post-secondary space. So as you know, in the fall, we had added, it was on your list of big news for the
Yes.
newsmakers for 2022 is our post-secondary. So colleges and universities across Canada, they varsity level programming is all done through us as well. So if your school has an esports program or is interested in starting one, please connect with Tyler Hetherington through Canada. He's our director of post-secondary. We'd love to get more schools on board. We already have a ton of schools, but and that's all on the website as well. If you look at the post-secondary list, there's a list of the schools that are currently involved, and I think it's actually out of date at this point. There are a number more of additional schools that have registered with us since then.
And there's your website there that I'm sharing.
Yeah.
I could see this as being the first robotics kind of model one day as
Mm-hmm.
it grows and very structured and embedded across the country. So
Mm-hmm.
you haven't wasted any time in making an impact, Melissa, and kudos to you for your passion and really to support students and helping them
Yes.
thrive in a more engaging way. What are the top 3 games that are popular in these competitions, by the way?
Yeah, it varies based
Yeah.
on age range and even parts of the country, quite frankly.
Yes.
I'd say within the education space, Rocket League is always a really good starting point because
Yeah.
the students really enjoy it, but it's also very palatable for people who are new to the idea of esports in schools. It's
Right.
just soccer with rocket-powered race cars.
Oh, cool.
So that one is really, really popular. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is always a winner with the younger crowds. And then for more intense strategy, League of Legends is really popular, and Overwatch is definitely taking a big increase right now. Lots of attention around Overwatch in Western Canada and also internationally with the announcement of the Overwatch World Cup coming back. So that's definitely going to draw a lot of attention in the coming year.
Amazing. Well, with that, you're going back to school tomorrow, so I'm
I
gonna
am.
be mindful of your time and grateful for you to join us today and provide some inspiration and opportunities for folks to engage students in esports across the country at their schools, whether it's K-12 or post-secondary. Melissa Burns, grateful. Happy New Year. Thank you
Happy New
again.
Year. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
That was Melissa Burns, the founder and chair of Esports Canada. My name is Robert Murtlacci, the Mindshare Learning Report. Be sure to check out www.mindshare.learning to get your latest issue. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.